nhà rồng sẽ lên từ từ đó là cô giáo hóa này cả rồng sẽ trả tao tên riêng rồi hóa sợ cho nó lúc có liên tu nó để cái lúc có liên tu Halloween và bây giờ là bia đan hình thiết xia sẵn trái đó kia là vậy cô bảo thế cái xia tên sẽ rồi là con cô ra nói giờ ý ra và cũng mất sau chỉ tàu kia là vậy đó bây giờ là lòng lòng niềm lòng ta này cái chỉ sai chứng chỉ sẵn trái mình ra cho mình ra pin là nhắm bó mình và mình kể nó mà ra là hùa tia mommy lo chơi. Daddy, thầu tư mommy mà lo chơi. This was the question my 8-year-old daughter asked me one rainy night. I had no courage to tell her that her mother would never be returning. So I simply whispered, Shinte na mommy malo. She gave me a soft, okay, and fell asleep in my lap. But how do I begin to tell her that her mommy is buried in the backyard, and that I was the one who saw her last moment of life? My wife, Kia, was the youngest daughter and most spoiled out of the 4 sisters. I knew that as I was dating her. She spent her time sitting on the couch while her older sisters were in the kitchen. Her mother didn't care to say anything, and while her sisters sweat and bled in the kitchen from duties, she was painting her nails with me in the den. I asked her one time why she didn't help, and she said, Why? My sisters can do it. I didn't know how to reply. And when I went home and discussed this with my parents, my mother said to me, Mitu only God can share you But I wanted her, and so I was going to endure it. 4 years into our marriage, endurance for eternity was too long. We began bickering, and she would spend her days at her mother's house and her nights in the guest room. 4 years and no children because she said I wasn't a good enough man for her to risk her body to birth children. My mother told me, Nay, 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 kuduhai. Yeah, that phrase sent me into a deep hatred of myself. I began hanging around my buddies from high school. Not the successful and happily married ones, but the ones who hadn't changed since we graduated. They only seemed to understand my unspoken pain, and they told me that I was wasting my life away with a woman who didn't love me. So I came home that night, drunk, ready to end things, when she said she was pregnant. The alcohol blurred my mind, and I just walked to sleep it off, finally waking in the morning to realize the kid wasn't mine. I hadn't touched her in months, and suddenly she was pregnant? I finally confronted her, and she said to me, You don't remember that night in your car when you came after me at the mall and forced me in the back seat? I felt terrible as I finally recalled that I did do that, and only because I was under the influence of alcohol and I couldn't remember straight. She had been gone for hours, and when she finally picked up her phone to tell me where she was, I drove there in a heat of rage. Damn, I whispered. I'm sorry. She threw a pillow at me. I don't need you to be sorry, Pheng. I need you to man up because you're about to have a baby with me. Maybe this child was created out of anger, but perhaps this child will save what is left of this sorry marriage. She was right. Maybe this baby would save us. And so I cleaned up my life and pulled away from the group of friends and began to pay attention to her again. Even though she was just as spoiled and bratty as before, she was now carrying my child. I had wanted her enough in the beginning to overlook it, so I decided to let it go. My sister threw us a baby shower and revealed that we were going to have a little girl. My heart ached with such intense love hearing that. She gave birth to my daughter on a stormy night and was in labor for an intense 14 hours where I had no idea what to do. When she finally pushed our daughter out into the world, though, her hair was a mass of blonde that looked nothing like me. Immediately, the doctor pushed me outside of the delivery room and told me to wait in the family area. My heart was pounding as I remembered the color of the baby's hair. How could this be? The anger boiled in me so hard that I felt ready to tear down the walls. A while after, the doctor came out to greet me and told me that my wife had decided not to let me back into the recovery room with her and had asked me to leave. I knew right away she knew her fault. I was angry, and hate filled me. I left home and cried to my mother, who didn't help when she said, "Cô thứ hai đứa coi thì có từng nhắn tay đen luôn đâu sir." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about all the excitement I had building up until the moment she was born. In my heart, could I forgive her and accept this child as mine? Did I love her enough to do so? I needed an explanation from her to make me feel better about this situation. The following morning, when I called her, she answered with a very dry voice, and I asked her how she was doing. "I'm okay. I know you're upset," she said. "How do you know how I feel? You pushed me out of the room and won't let me in. You shouldn't label me with feelings when you do not know and do not stand in my shoes." She started crying. "I'm so sorry. I really thought she was yours." "Who is the father?" "This guy I was seeing on the side when we were having problems." "Yeah, we're still having problems. Does this mean you're still seeing him?" "No," she sobbed. "We broke it off a while ago, around the time I found out I was pregnant. It was only once with him, and then shortly after it was with you in the car. I honestly thought she would be yours." "Do you love me?" "Yes, Pheng, I do." "Then she will be mine, and nothing will be said of it." It was agreed. She was my daughter. My parents weren't happy about it, but the child was innocent, and if I said she was mine, then she was mine. We named her Nancy, and she was a light in our life. Gia and I let go of the past and moved on with Nancy's little hand in ours. After Nancy was born, however, Gia couldn't conceive anymore, and no matter how hard we tried, we were left with nothing. Year by year, Nancy grew, and Gia and I became better. As my wife got older, she matured, and eventually we got along. Or so I thought. When Nancy turned 8, we threw this huge birthday party for her, and everyone brought gifts that left her smiling. We were so in love with this little girl of ours. She had blonde hair, and her eyes were bright blue. Everyone knew that she wasn't mine based on how she looked, but I ignored it and fought teeth and nail when that was brought out to debate. After a while, people just let it go because it didn't bother me. After the birthday party, Nancy asked to sleep over at her cousin's house and left with my older brother. It was just me and Gia at home, and I noticed a black car parked a few feet away from our house. That car had been there all afternoon, and it wasn't one I recognized that belonged to any of the neighbors. "I'm going to go to the store real quick," Gia said. "We're out of toilet paper." "Let me go with you." "No," she said. "I can just do it. I'll be back real quick." "Okay," I said. "Drive safe." I watched her drive off, and the black car followed her. I followed them and found their cars parked together at the mall parking lot, where she got into the other car. Anger fumed me, and I drove back home, where a half hour later, she returned with a pack of toilet paper. "How long have you been seeing him?" I asked. "Seeing who?" I grabbed the dishes on the counter and threw them at her. She jumped as they crashed into pieces on the ground. "What the hell?" she cried. "You're cheating on me again. I followed you, and I saw you." "Pang," she said with a broken face. I'm I'm sorry. He wants me back. 8 years I've been raising Nancy like mine when he was nowhere to be found. And now he suddenly wants you back? What are you going to tell your daughter?" "The truth. That you're not her father. Her real father has been the one who has been sending her money all these years." The truth was revealed. She never cut ties off with him, and he had been in and out of Nancy's life. He had photos of her at every event and age. Anger blinded me, and I grabbed her neck, squeezing her throat as she looked at me with wide eyes. "You have hurt me for the last time!" And something in me snapped as I watched her trying to breathe, her hands clawing at me, gasping for breath. It wasn't until she no longer fought me that I realized what I had done. She wasn't moving or breathing, and her eyes remained opened, staring at me, capturing her last moments of life. "Oh God," I whispered, and then I let her go with a thud on the ground. The thought of burying her in the backyard came to me, and I went to work, digging the ground in the dark, feeling the dirt go up in my nails. I wrapped her body in a sheet of blanket, carried her out there, dropped her in, and covered her up with the earth. And then I went inside and showered. They say that the mind remembers what happens if taken too soon or without warning. I guess for my wife, she recorded everything down in her mind. That night, when I went to bed, I heard the back door swing open like someone barging in. I sat up in bed and listened, waiting for a sound. And then I heard it, a gagging, like dying breath trying to get air. It sounded like it came from the living room, and as I listened, the sky thundered, and when lightning flashed, I saw a figure standing at the door to my room. I pulled the covers over my head and put my hands together to pray for forgiveness. And that was when I heard the gagging sound inside the blankets with me, and I felt something cold and wet across my arms. I yelled out and threw the blankets off, falling off the bed and running out the door to the garage. Grabbing the keys hanging on the wall, I jumped into my car and turned it on. As the garage door opened, I saw her standing there, body bent and cowered over her with her hair hanging around her blue face. She was gasping, and then she began limping toward me, gagging.
Godsey.
Daddy! My daughter's voice woke me up, and I jerked awake to find myself in the backyard by the freshly dug grave where my wife lay. My daughter was staring at me with confused eyes as I quickly got up. Why are you sleeping out here? Where is Mommy? I forced a laugh and said, Mommy is visiting Tata and will come back soon. She smiled and skipped inside the house, and I followed. Every night, she was here with me, gasping and gagging, and every night my daughter's voice says, Mommy, lache? And when she says that, I know that my wife is back, and torture will begin. It has been a nightmare since, and I've tried everything, but I can't seem to leave the house. And it isn't until one night when I'm sitting in the corner of my room fighting off sleep that I hear someone coming to the house. It is a woman who is dressed in a business suit, carrying a briefcase and a happy family of 4. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? I asked. This is a beautiful home with 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. It's a half story, so you will find that it's a very warm house. The backyard is big and perfect for you, the woman holding the briefcase said. I am confused as the family tours the house. I yelled for them to leave, and they can't hear me. Is there any history as to why it was suddenly put on the market? The father asked. The woman smiled and replied, Well, I won't lie to you. There was an incident here a few months ago. The husband went haywire and murdered his wife and daughter and then took his own life. Oh my, the wife said. What happened? I don't really know the entire story. I listened, and then I saw my wife walked out from our bedroom with a pale and bluish face. She opened her mouth and she began gagging. The sound echoed across the room, and the family screamed, rushing out. My daughter came jumping out with a bloody head, and she smiled up at me. Mommy, la chết là... Ôi trời ơi, nè chẳng tin là mong ra nào tía, nem nông tàn này kẻ chỉ sa kinh, chỉ sẵn trái nó mà. Ràn trường rạp trình nhằm bóp mình bà mi trẻ.